Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show. I thought I'd start today by taking a look at the year 2020, which is not quite three-quarters finished, but is already one of the most extraordinary years in modern history. What could we compare it to in terms of upheaval? 1968, perhaps, 1956, 1918, 1848. I'm just looking over the list of things that have happened so far. According to Wikipedia, in January we have Hong Kong protests. We have a state of emergency in Australia because of wildfires, which of course were blamed on something called global warming, as if Australia did not have wildfires all the time. We have the drone strike in Baghdad, killing the Iranian general Soleimani. And then we have dozens of people dead at his funeral. With a very curious incident of the impeachment trial of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And it's the most extraordinary thing because since 2016, we had been told repeatedly by supposedly authoritative sources that Trump had stolen the election at the behest of President Vladimir Putin of Russia. But when it came to the impeachment, there was nothing about Russia in it. Suddenly, it was all about the Ukraine, making it clear that this was simply about replacing Trump. Russia, Ukraine, what's the difference? And he was convicted in the House of Representatives, but acquitted by the Senate of the United States. And then, of course, on January 30th, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a public health emergency of international concern. Apparently the sixth time that this measure has been invoked since 2009, so that is to say, fairly common pandemics. But of course, COVID-19 has not been treated like any other recent pandemic. On February 27th, we have a 2020 stock market crash, largest one-day decline in history, 1,191 points. And the stock market continues to fall, inspiring panic in the leadership of the United States. Italy is the first country outside of China to be most greatly affected by COVID-19. The whole country is put in quarantine. And March 9th, the Dow Jones falls 2,000 points, another record. Oil prices fall to effectively zero. And so the stock market continues to fall, and we see panic in Europe over COVID-19. So much panic that Eurovision was canceled, which is, I suppose, good news for anyone with a good taste. And then we have a curious thing in March where China says that the COVID-19 is, well, it's under control in China. And of course, well, it's China, so they must be telling the truth because they are a very transparent government. And in April is when the number of COVID-19 cases passes 1 million worldwide. And at this point, the entirety of the Western world is in a complete panic. Now, the strange thing about COVID-19 is that, of course, there have been, the capitalist system is noted for crashes. Crashes are simply endemic to the capitalist system. Alan Greenspan was supposed to have dealt with this problem circa 2000 when he announced that he had abolished the business cycle and that government credit was going to make recessions, depressions a thing of the past. But of course, in 2008, the world economy seized up and almost came apart. April 12th, the Pope live streams his Urbi et Orbi blessing. Essentially, the Catholic Church canceled Easter, which is something that had never happened in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. And we move into spring, and we find, oh yes, Facebook, in April 23rd, Facebook removes pseudoscience and conspiracy theory as options for targeted ads, as criticism mounts against social media for the role in spreading misinformation about the coronavirus. It's very curious because people who listen to this live stream don't need to be reminded, but I'm going to say it anyway for people who haven't heard it before, is that the initial reaction of the World Health Organization and health ministries worldwide, including the Centers for Disease Control, was that COVID-19 was really not something to worry about much. Just use common sense. The real virus was xenophobia, was racism. You know, just wash your hands. Later we got social distancing. And then we got lockdowns. We got people told something, again, extraordinary, and I don't know whether this has ever happened in history before, that people were essentially confined to their dwellings. And it was made known in many, many places across the Western world that people who flouted this order would be cited, fined, perhaps even arrested. Now, this panic that started in last winter, it is still around today. And when we look at 2020, we find something truly extraordinary, which is, as mentioned, collapses, busts, panics, economic panics have been a feature of capitalism from the very beginning. But this one was different. This one was deliberately engineered by governments, that the economy had to be smashed in order to fight a virus, that businesses, a great many businesses, were deemed to be non-essential. And churches, indeed, were deemed to be non-essential. And in places like California, they still are. Indoor worship is still banned in the state of California. And again, one looks at modern history, and this has ever happened before? And in what circumstances has it ever happened before? So we see something that is new as well. We see this union of business and government, woke capital as it has been described, where business works hand in hand with government to enforce diktats. And big business, especially social media, determined that so-called misinformation, or that is to say that opinions and claims outside the narrative, will not be permitted. And indeed, people who make claims outside of the narrative are now demonized as COVIDiots, or even as murderers. Because, for instance, the claim that, oh, I don't know, young people getting together, going to the park, going to the beach, going to the pubs, or whatever, these people are fomenting death. And anyone who disagrees is obviously in favor of death and must be dealt with accordingly. And strange thing is that even as the toll of the virus recedes, and it is clear to everyone that COVID-19 is a disease which is deadly only to old people, with rare exceptions. And by old people, I mean very old people indeed, typically people over the age of 80. The panic intensifies. This week, the government of New Zealand locked down the country because of the shocking news that there had been 4 new cases over the past 102 days. You look at the Democratic presidential nomination, the race for the nomination, you see that in the beginning, Joe Biden, he finishes 5th in New Hampshire. Under ordinary circumstances, that would have been the end of his campaign. But it was clear that the fix was in. The fix was in as early as the Iowa caucuses, when voting broke down for some mysterious reason. And a candidate called Pete Buttigieg, who is now almost completely forgotten, hailed himself as the winner of the Iowa caucuses. And this was clearly an attempt to knock Bernie Sanders out of the race. Same thing happened in 2016. And the Democratic Party decides that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee, despite the fact that he is 77 years old, and he is clearly not in the best mental health, to put it mildly. One doesn't have to look at his most recent pronouncements. One can go back to the beginning of this year, where he's raving about arable land and how arable land decided that, it's Donald Trump that actually has the mental problems, not Joe Biden, that Joe Biden is an excellent. Now, of course, if it had been a Republican candidate who had had the involvement with the Ukraine that Biden and his son Hunter did, it would be a story. But so we see in 2020 a deliberately engineered economic destruction to consolidate power. Whose power? Well, the power of government. Not all governments, not Trump's government, because Trump is being blamed personally by the Democratic Party for the death of 160,000 people, and control of who have decided that they cannot brook any, it's being a monopoly of control of, have been had their public information. Now, if you want to go back to the beginning of the COVID-19 and subsequently, the same health authorities, their defense, they said, well, data available is, if that was the case, why that led to the destruction of the economy and essentially the destruction of society and the suspension of civil liberties. 2021, 2022, we've been told in record time, well, they might only be 50 or 60% effective. And one wonders, why would state authorities allow the release of vaccines that could only be 50 to 60% effective? But then it becomes clear that what this means is the sanitary dictator will have a COVID-19 problem, but now we find out they're not. So continue even after vaccines. In 2020, we see that our rulers, and apparently our rulers are now bureaucrats, health bureaucrats. Healthy, functioning economy is surplus to requirements. We can simply print more money or borrow more money. For how long? Into perpetuity? because it's obvious that this orgy of borrowing around the world can only end in tears, inflation, or perhaps it could lead to an entirely new economic system, or free enterprise will effectively no longer exist. Uh, Economic concentration that has ever, with companies like, well, spectacularly wealthy. They already were spectacularly wealthy, but of course, to certain companies, people being shut binge watch TV serials, that's very good news indeed. Very, very good news indeed. There is something happening. There's something going on and as I say, I think that it is nothing less than an attempt at a total reset, a ground zero, if you will. I talked yesterday about this essay on the new normals. And, well, the old normality is gone. Now, did we decide that the old normality would have to go? No, it was decided for us, again, by politicians listening to health bureaucrats. That we had been given glimmers of this brave new world ever since 2008. That 2008 should have been the realization that globalization had failed, that it had failed utterly. But instead, we were told, as Adam Curtis reminds us, that Tina, there is no alternative. Back in the 20th century, the failures of socialism and communism were always met with the demands for more socialism and more communism. And here we see the same thing again, that the failures of globalism are met with calls for even more globalism. That the elite is fully invested in globalism, and the elite is exceedingly unhappy with Brexit, with the election of Donald Trump, with the rise of nationalist populist regimes in Europe. And they've decided that this will not stand. And they have this disease running cover for them, that any possible outrage is justified by this disease. And since they are the people determining, hand in hand with the media, exactly how deadly this disease is. That is to say, people are helpless to do anything about not a handful of cities worldwide, including Psy, the world's media capital. The overall hospitals are not overflowing. Bodies are not piling up in the streets. Most of us, many people feel like the world is updated in real time and presented without context. Average age of victims, how many people generally. We've never done this for any other illness, never, because the technology now exists to aggregate these counts almost instantly. And then both conventional and social media are blasting out these figures, not just every day, but every second. SARS-CoV-2 worldwide is slightly worse or tuberculosis of the virus. Society's death obsession that we had, well, there was actually a serious chant. Now, as the fear grew ever greater, with talk of nuclear winter, and one was called, what, the day after? And then Reagan and Gorbachev signed an agreement, and perhaps for rejoicing. It should have been a cause for a readjustment of the global warming movement. That, oh, weather doesn't seem to have changed. But climate change, an elite obsession, aspiring members of the elite took it too hard. But it was not really a life. And then strangely in 2020, we get COVID-19, which has had enormous contraction in the economy with no end in sight. Climate change having been rejected as a means by which to usher in the death of one would area and the unwarranted destruction of the economy, of society, of civil liberties would be met with a ferocious counter reaction. That has not been about this. That we see this with AIDS. One might have thought that when the truth about AIDS and how it was transmitted became known, that this would result in a ferocious intuitive response. Instead, AIDS, strangely enough, resulted in the triumph of the gay agenda. The attacks on September 11, 2001, one might have thought, and indeed I did, that this would result in a ferocious reaction against Islam throughout the Western world. Instead, it resulted in exactly the opposite. That opposition to, say, Muslim immigration in the West is now seen as a absolutely vile thing. It can hardly be mentioned, not just in polite society, but almost anywhere. So those people thinking that the spectacular failures of most of the politicians around the world with regard to COVID-19 and the immense pain of all sorts and increased deaths from the health system being all COVID, all the 19, again, that this would lead to a ferocious reaction against these politicians, our early indications are that it has not and will not, because the health officials say that they acted based on the best information they had. They acted in good faith, and so you can hardly hold that against them. Besides, apparently, one extra death is too many. We can't be too safe. This is lunatic thinking. It's absolute lunatic thinking. But lunatic thinking has become dominant in Western society. Let's look at Black Lives Matter. Again, one might have thought that the widespread chaos, anarchy, destruction that followed the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, this coming after what I've dubbed the Black Intifada, which has been going on for decades in the United States, that this would lead to a ferocious reaction. But instead, it has led to exactly the opposite. That we've been told that white people are guilty, they're always guilty, they will always be guilty, that white people are wicked, and there's nothing that can be done about their wickedness. And society, or our perception of it, must become all black all the time. Now, this might change, but when you see situations, when you see a pattern being repeated, when a natural reaction does not happen, or more to the point, is not allowed to happen, it tells us that there are powers working behind the scenes to prevent this. Again, the near collapse of the world economy in 2008, which was brought about directly by the recklessness and greed of financial institutions, should have led to a ferocious reaction against not just financial institutions, but their enablers in Congress, in houses of parliament, or whatever. But it has not. These people have been allowed to become richer and more powerful than ever. And not just more powerful in an economic sense, but more powerful in a social sense. That, trans rights are wonderful. Well, the banks are telling you so. Biggest companies in the world are telling you so. That these companies now claim the plenary power to instruct us all on morality. It is really extraordinary. And And as I was saying yesterday with the essay on the invasion of the new normals, I really think that we have got to a point of speak now or forever hold your peace. If Joe Biden wins the presidency in November, what little is left of freedom, political freedom in the United States will be extirpated. There is no question about that. None whatsoever. In fact, Biden has gone so far as to talk about or promising to remove the presumption of innocence in criminal cases involving alleged sexual attacks. That's how far this has gone. But again, there is a conspiracy, and the conspiracy is perhaps the biggest conspiracy that the world has ever seen, which is that there are still too many people out there with too much economic freedom, with too much political freedom, with too much social freedom, and this must end. It must end because the elite, the globalists, woke capital, and governments have decided that it must end. Nothing must stand in the way of their taking total power. Let's look at the chat. DeBrea says that was the fakest crash in the history of the U.S. Well, let's look at the changes that the media has wrought in our lives. And of course, this is a part of scale. It used to be that people would form political opinions, social opinions. They would hear things from people. They would talk with other people. To a certain extent, it was bottom up. Not that long ago, rather than relying on pollsters and focus groups, political parties would have a highly stratified organization that went to the top to the very bottom. You have these people called ward healers, say, people who, looking for favor with parties, they would hang around neighborhoods, go to coffee shop, bars, church socials, whatever, and talk to people. What's on your mind? What do you like about what the government's doing? What don't you like about what the government's doing? What should the government do that it doesn't? That sort of thing. That's all over now. It's all top down. And of course, the purpose of polls is not to register public opinion, but to mold public opinion. The same thing with focus groups. The result of the focus group is known before it has even begun. This is truly manufactured consent. There are some questions on which what public opinion thinks is well known. Death penalty, abortion, and there are some others. But you notice that pollsters will ask a question based on something that became a controversy last week. These are questions people don't know very much about. They haven't thought very much about it. In many cases, they simply don't care about it. But the pollsters deliver the verdict, and the media trumpets this. Oh, I see. Now there's a consensus on this thing that everybody just heard of. In fact, most people don't even know or care about. And so something must be done. We have a media, and which works hand in hand with social media to say this is the truth. No other opinion is possible. This must be done. And of course, if you attempt to stand out against this, then you will be, as they say, canceled. And canceling is, it's really approaching Roman levels, making people into persons now. And of course, the media has created the illusion that it is only reflecting public opinion, whereas that's simply not the case, especially since so many people are so alienated from politics that they don't really think about it very much. Let's see. Let's go back to the chat again. They didn't panic in Sweden. No, they didn't panic in Sweden, but let's ignore Sweden. Okay? Sweden has nothing to teach us. This is what the media has decided. And the media has constantly been lying about Sweden for months now. And the amusing thing is several people have pointed out, oh, those Swedes, they're notorious libertarians. No, the Swedes are opposite of libertarians. Sweden is one of the most closely controlled countries in the Western world and has been for decades. In fact, Roland Huntford wrote a book about this circa 1970 called The New Totalitarians on this very subject. Okay, did KMG ever do a book club on one of Bowie's biographies? No, I have not done so. There's two books about Bowie's songs, which I quite liked, but this runs into thousands of pages discussing every song that he ever recorded. Heck McNeck says, it seems like the elite want to move towards the South American model for the rest of the world. They can just hover over the rest of us by helicopter. Yeah, I guess the Brazilian model is one that they would like. Of course, a nationalist populist was elected president of Brazil. But no, the elite, it does not like ordinary people. It doesn't know ordinary people. It doesn't like them. Of course, people have made it into the elite, you know, from the ground up, as it were, a few people. But these people tend to be what they call Monterey Peninsula College hicklibs, that their life is an attempt to atone for the horror of being born in Kansas, say. The dollar likely to lose reserve currency status, says William Hicks. Yeah, I don't know. I've been hearing this for so long. I suppose it could happen. You know, I suppose it could happen. 5 months, my guess is $10 trillion roughly between direct spending by the federal government and lost output opportunity costs and economic catastrophe unfolding before. Now, in the not too recent past, say in my country, Canada, the full extent of the calamity that's facing would have been discussed, but it's not being discussed because the media has decided that we don't want to make Justin Trudeau look bad, and everything is going to be all right so long as the government borrows enough money. Now, there's not enough money in the world to borrow to deal with the consequences of, you know, continued lockdown, say. What about all these businesses that have been smashed by being deemed of course, the U.S. border is still closed, and you know, that's where a great many of the tourists come from, but they have been lost for months, and in a situation like that, people from the United States might decide they're not coming to Victoria anymore. Because even after the border is eventually reopened, I'm sure that a lot of Americans will think that the border is still closed, or that coming to Canada for tourism will involve some sort of ordeal. Debrea says, I have no idea about stocks, but I think I made more money in one transaction in June to account for all of Alex's lifetime gains. That would be Alex DeLarge. Brandon Smith, can Trump pull a Biden and run as VP in 2024? I know he'll be pushing 80, but look, if Trump loses the election, then I don't know, district attorney, you know, New York State or whatever, they're going to try to have him arrested. Again, there's no question in my mind about that. Oh, well, they can't go as far as Obama because Obama's a former. Brandon Smith says 200 years to get to 1 trillion. 20 years later, it's 9 trillion. That's debt, presumably. 2040 on the same trajectory is 360 trillion. No. At some point, something's got to give, and it will probably be the will to live. Well, no, wait, just the debt. something like that. I'm sorry. Apparently, this is William Hicks has heard a bit about this afternoon. He's basically promising to fix everything, has a plan for COVID-19, and even to save planet Earth. Going to fix problems caused. The party in the media is in those places with Democratic mayors and Democratic governors. And if you want to look at places in the South, which again, the media is simply okay. Mexican single party often do not even appear within the Democratic Party, and it's like a momentous change. A Democratic Party in California has for decades out, who don't really care about the Jews, and what they want is to turn California into this fellow who styles himself in the general election, which tells me that it's over for the old guard in the Democratic Party in California. I spoke yesterday about part one of an essay by Ian Davis in the Off Guardian called CCDH, the Center for Cancel Culture and Digital Hypocrisy, and he has now produced part two, and I want to talk about that. He writes, we looked at the CCDH, who in particular, we looked at their recent attack upon people who expressed some doubts about vaccines, emergent techno-fascist state. The CCDH is a small organization and D-list a celebrity as patron and 6 board members. They state on their website that their small budget is funded by unnamed philanthropic trusts and members of the public. The CCDH links to the Parliamentary Labour Party are considerable. Also a serving member of the Trilateral Commission. Founded in 1973 by oil and banking tycoon David Rockefeller and political kingmaker Zbigniew Brzezinski, who divide. It brings together world political leaders with global investors and bankers, academics, and policy advisors. The Trilateral Commission is a powerful and influential globalist policy think tank whose stated aim is to build, quote, an international. The CCDH's association with people like London Mayor Sadiq Khan and Starmer banned from their platform. While failing to convince Twitter to censor the views of George Galloway, they did rid the Twitter sphere of right-wing mouthpiece Katie Hopkins. Personally, I have little time for Hopkins. However, if we continue to allow this censorship of people, are a direct threat to plurality of opinion in an open and free democratic society. Well, liberalism is dead. There's no question that liberalism is dead. Liberalism believes in free inquiry. Liberalism believes that truth, or sunlight, as they say, is the best disinfectant. This is a view which has passed its sell-by date because, according to the progressives, the SJWs, the wokesters, whatever you want to call them, speech with which they disagree is not speech. It is hate speech. It is a crime. And of course, it cannot be allowed to be printed in any form. The CCDH's Stop Funding Fake News campaign encourages advertisers to avoid placing ads on websites it doesn't like. Their successful campaign apparently influenced Twitter to ban the website Zero Hedge. At least CCDH is happy to give that impression. Among their other campaigns, Stop Hate for Profit specifically targets Facebook advertisers. Again, the objective is to silence any and all who the CCDH don't agree with. CCDH says Zero Hedge is a fake news site that spreads coronavirus misinformation. Zero Hedge republishes work from other sites, and it is fair to say the quality can vary. However, Zero Hedge also produces its own content, which is well-researched, cites all the evidence it uses. It is very far from the genuine fake news we commonly see from the mainstream media, MSN. Well, if we want to talk about fake news, let's talk about the Steele dossier. Let's talk about the claim that and Trump stole the election, that Trump stole the election with Russia's help, at Russia's behest. Now it's all made up. It is all made up. And as mentioned earlier, when the Democratic Party was impeaching Trump, they turned on a dime, and there's nothing about Russia in the articles of impeachment, which of course was an announcement to the whole world that they knew that it was all made up. But we'll just move on to the Ukraine instead. Now, that will be all made up as well, but it doesn't matter. We will have moved on to, for some other reason, to remove Trump, such as that he is personally responsible for 160,000 Americans dying of COVID-19, which is an absurd and, well, a dangerous claim to make. The CCDH report that Twitter banned Zero Hedge for the doxing of a Chinese research scientist. The offending article does report Dr. Zhao's office contact, email, and work phone number, which were publicly available on the Wuhan Institute of Virology website at the time. Zero Hedge didn't reveal anything at all. They simply reported information already in the public domain. While failing to correct this erroneous charge of doxing, the CCDH were spinning fake news of their own. They wrote, Zero Hedge, claimed Dr. Zhao was behind the global coronavirus pandemic. Zero Hedge made no such claim in the article. They cited a lot of evidence, which made it a perfectly legitimate question to ask. All they did was report the evidence and ask the obvious question the evidence raised. According to CCDH, this is coronavirus disinformation. Yet it is their misreporting of the facts that is disinformation, and their claims that are fake news. The CCDH has numerous partners, include the global NGO, the World Wildlife Fund, which is a private crown and has gathered support from many of the world's biggest so-called NGOs, global financial institutions, and governments alike. Yes, the NGO, the non-governmental organization. Well, a great many of these NGOs receive a lot of money from governments, also from big business. And it is the job of NGOs to come up with studies, to make claims which justify campaigns by government. It's that simple. They are plausible deniability for government as well. Oh, it's not us making these claims, it's the American Cancer Association or the Heart and Lung Association or whatever. And where do they get their money from? Well, they get their money from governments, and they get their money from big business, often interested parties like the pharmaceutical industry. The World Wildlife Fund was formed in 1961 by the eugenicists Julian Huxley and Max Nicholson. It has relentlessly pursued its goal of depopulation and undemocratic global governance, all done using the ruse of environmental concern as a ploy to cover its appalling objectives. Among its other founding members were Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who established the Bilderberg Group and took bribes in the Lockheed Martin arms scandal, and his close friend, Prince Philip, who in 1988 said that if he were reincarnated, he would like to be a deadly virus to do something about overpopulation. Now, if one looks at an organization like the WWF, every week you asked people, oh, they would have a favorable opinion of the WWF. Oh, look, there's a panda bear, and we love all panda bears. So the WWF, well, they're doing good work. We don't really know what work the WWF is doing. But again, if you look at the situation in Canada, we have this extraordinary scandal going on now involving something called the We Charity, which turns out is like this with the Trudeau government. Oh, yes, the We Charity, they're doing great work. Well, what work are they doing exactly? Because as far as I can see, it involves getting a bunch of school children together to hoot and holler when various politicians and maybe some figures from the entertainment world come out on stage and who lavish praise on these young people, saying that they are the future and the future is now, and you should be telling us what to do because, you know, we're corrupt and you're idealistic, etc., etc., etc. That is to say, I don't see any value in what they do at all. Is there really a problem with adolescents lacking self-esteem, or adolescents not being praised to the skies? I mean, this has been commonplace for decades now. But again, I mean, the question to ask about organizations such as CCDH is, why would such an organization be able to wield such power? Well, the reason is because the fix has been in from the beginning with the plausible deniability. Oh, you people are fighting hate and everyone is against hate. Of course, hate directed at right wingers or white supremacists, that's perfectly acceptable. But if a difference is to defund all of these NGOs, every single one of them. If these people want to raise money, if they want to try to get money, as so many of them do from Microsoft, go ahead. But the idea, I mean, this is an idea that outraged Thomas Jefferson. The idea that governments, that is to say taxpayers, give money, substantial sums of money, to organizations which advocate policies which are directly against the interests of the taxpayers, well, it's outrageous. But I don't know, the NGOs seem to have some sort of force field around them, which render them invulnerable, I don't know, to even what should be common political logic that, whom and qui bono, who benefits? Well, we know who benefits from NGOs. The elite benefit from NGOs. Toby Young reports at Lockdown Skeptics, it's official, UK plunges into recession. UK GDP, shown here as an index, has returned to 2003 levels, and it is, of all of the graphs that I've seen recently, this one brings to mind falling off a cliff, because that's what it looks like. The the UK economy suffered its largest contraction in Q2 since records began, which was 1955. GDP shrank by a whopping 20.4%, and since it's the second quarter of negative growth in succession, that means the economy is officially in recession. Overall, the British economy has shrunk by 22% since the beginning of the year. The government will blame the virus, of course, but that excuse only goes so far, because the UK has suffered the worst recession in the G7. GDP shrank by 13.8% in France, 12.4% in Italy, 12% in Canada, 10.1% in Germany, 9.5% in the US, and is forecast to shrink by 7.6% in Japan. Lockdown zealots will claim our economic woes have been exacerbated by Boris's failure to place the country under virtual house arrest even earlier. But one of those countries, Japan, which has fared the best in the G7 if the forecast is accurate, never imposed a full lockdown, and Sweden's economy performed better than most in Europe, only shrinking by 8.6% in Q2. But of course, these GDP numbers are corrupt because they include government inputs. And government inputs, of course, have absolutely exploded this year. I would like to see a rival index to the GDP, which measures, I don't know, the non-governmental economy. Let's see how business is actually doing. Toby Young writes, one explanation for why Britain has fared the worst in the G7 is that our government has been so chaotic, destroying what the economist Paul Krugman calls the confidence fairy. First, we were going to take it on the chin, then we weren't. Testing was scaled back because it was unreliable, then it was scaled back up because it was our best hope of containing new outbreaks. Masks outside healthcare settings weren't recommended, then they were. Schools would reopen before the summer holidays, then they wouldn't. The lockdown is over unless you live in Leicester, Manchester, Bradford, Preston, etc., in which case it isn't. You can go on holiday to Spain without having to quarantine on your return. Oh, no, you can't. But Portugal's off the list, right? Maybe not. France? Who knows? And he refers to an essay by a contributor asking the $6 million question, is there any method in the government's madness, some diabolical plot orchestrated by Dominic Cummings or is it just one cock-up after another? I would say that it's one cock-up after another because, again, there's this illusion of competence. There's an illusion of expertise. There's an illusion of calm, thoughtful leadership. I learned when I was a reporter that you wonder what goes on in government. What are these people talking about? I tell you what they're talking about, what they're obsessed with, and you can see this if you watch Armando Iannucci's The Thick of It. They call it news management or issues management. There's various amusing examples of this in Iannucci's American version of The Thick of It called Veep, where the president's secretary says some golfer just died. Should we issue a press release? Because this obsession with the news, and by the news I mean today's news, that I learned years ago that when Stephen Harper was prime minister, there would be a daily meeting or a weekday meeting of aides at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the line would be given about everything that was in the morning's newspapers. No matter how trivial. Oh, something has happened. What is the government's take on this? What is the line on this? And of course, apparently it would be impossible to say, well, this only happened last night, so perhaps we're going to have to wait for some more information before having an opinion on it or having a policy on it. No, that's not how political parties work anymore. It is all short-term thinking. And by short-term thinking, I mean day by day. I mean, it sounds bogus, right? I mean, governments couldn't not be as short-sighted as that. Well, I can tell you, from personal knowledge that they are as short-sighted as that, because they don't want to be caught out by saying, I'll give you an example. When the famed professor Hayakawa, S.I. Hayakawa, was running for the Senate in California, and he was asked his opinion, I think, what was this, 1968? He was asked his opinion on dog racing, legalization thereof, regulation thereof, something like that, of dog racing in California. And he said, I don't give a damn about dog racing. That would be an unthinkable thing for a politician to say now, because they are supposed to have opinions, and not only opinions, but policies on every conceivable thing under the sun. And of course, the result of that is when you spend so much time on trivia, it doesn't are really important on for as long as it has to. What happens then? Oh, well, so if if you hear from your government that, oh yeah, okay, we've just begun to understand the severity of the economic percent, I would not at all be surprised to see very near drops by 5,000, 41,000, as health chiefs agree to count only people who died within 28 days of a positive test. But new daily infections rise above 1,000 again. You see, we have some good news. It appears that public bodies had been exaggerating the number of deaths. But no, wait a minute. Here's the bad news. We don't want you to stop panicking. We don't want you to stop panicking of what has transpired this year. And well, this may be over optimistic on my part, because as I said, it lost their heads over this. Well, the answer is nobody. I don't know. It would be mean, error, or a whole host of catastrophic security errors. Now, in Britain has demanded scientists publish evidence of coronavirus transmission in pubs after an expert said drinking indoors in bars raised the risk of transmission. Bacteria expert Professor Hugh Pennington said there has been a COVID-19. The Aberdeen University professor also told BBC Radio last week that being indoors in a pub can increase the risk of infection as hot and steamy environment helps the virus get about. His interview came the day after Aberdeen was put back into lockdown after more than 20 pubs and restaurants were involved. 3,000 members of staff tested positive for the virus by the time lockdown measures were announced on March 20th, when the virus was rampant in the country. Again, become the enemy of the people, and I mean that fully and sincerely. Okay, so there is an increase in new cases of COVID-19. That's a bad thing. Okay, how exactly is it a bad thing? Because if the number of people in hospitals and in ICU units is declining and declining rapidly, and the number of deaths has fallen off a cliff, what this tells us is that the overwhelming majority of these new cases of COVID-19 are asymptomatic, that this disease is not a threat to the people who are now getting it. In the early stages of the disease, it wiped out old people. It caused tremendous death counts in old age homes and long-term care facilities. This is how viruses work. They are opportunistic, that they go after the low-hanging fruit. And there are always going to be people for various reasons who are going to be less susceptible to dangerous or possible fatal consequences of a virus. But all this has been known about COVID-19 for months now. Now, buried in stories, for instance, this old age home in Lynn Valley in North Vancouver, which is responsible for a great many of the deaths in my province of British Columbia. It was buried in this story that the average age of the people who died was 87 years old. Now, another question that might be asked, you may have seen this information and I've said it before, how long do people normally live once they are admitted to long-term care facilities? And the answer is 5 months. 5 months. So, okay. He said that there had been a few cases in his pubs, Tim Martin says this, but nothing, it appears, which could be described as an outbreak, and has urged Professor Pennington to publish his findings. He added in the statement, which appeared in the Morning Advertiser, that there have been high levels of transmission in hospitals, care homes, abattoirs, and certain production facilities. Martin highlighted that since pubs have reopened, the level of testing has dramatically increased. Quote, there has been a handful of individual cases of positive tests for the virus in our pubs, but nothing, it appears, which could be described as an outbreak, and there appears not to have been, up until now, a case of transmission from person to person among staff or from staff to customers or vice versa. So we don't want people drinking in pubs. We don't want them drinking inside pubs. Social activity is bad. Well, how about if they drink outdoors? Well, we see in Britain, we've had prominent people clamoring for smoking to be banned entirely on streets near pubs. And it couldn't be clearer what the goal here is to stop people going out in public, to force them to stay home. Now, so long as liquor stores stay open, so long as off sales are available in pubs, if you are going to force people to drink at home, this is obviously going to lead to an increase, a significant increase in alcoholism, because there is going to be no one around to tell these people that they've had enough. And there is going to be, among these solitary drinkers at home, they're not going to have any fear of embarrassing themselves in front of other people. If you've had too much to drink, I guess you can just stagger off to your bedroom and flop on the bed. And I don't know. Perhaps the reason for this destruction of society is that we don't want people getting information from other people or exchanging opinions from other people, because this would not necessarily be, approved opinions, and we can't have that. We simply can't have that because it's too dangerous. You may have seen a story recently that teachers or teaching authorities admitted that there was a problem with this Zoom education, in that parents might overhear the indoctrination that the children are getting. They actually said this, that parents are going to, however they described it, their instructions in citizenship, proper citizenship, or whatever. But can't have parents overhearing this because, they might object. And of course, parents are paying the bill for the teachers, So, how far are the progressives willing to go to toss out Donald Trump? Well, according to Adbusters, they are preparing to lay siege to the White House in Washington, D.C. I'm looking at tactical briefing number 1 of hashtag White House siege. All right, all you activists, it's been 9 years since we set up the political earthquake of Occupy Wall Street, laying siege to NYC's Zuccotti Park and inspiring thousands of similar protests around the world. The Occupy anniversary arrives September 17th, 2020, and it may be the perfect day to trigger another global Big Bang moment, a massive collective action of the sweetest kind of disobedience. The why hardly needs recitation, because for these 9 years, the shadows have only grown longer, inequality has soared, not a single Wall Street CEO spent a night in jail for his role in the 2008 financial meltdown. Politicians and corporate criminals continue to savage the public trust with impunity, and all the while, with this howling void of a president, his sins too many to name, sits smugly by Christmas. I'm going to comment on this, that to the extent that any major American politician or major Western politician is speaking out about the concentration of economic power, it's Donald Trump. It's certainly not Joe Biden. It's certainly not Boris Johnson. It's certainly not Justin Trudeau. It is Donald Trump. And he has been threatening, as of late, to deal with economic equality, to even suggesting, breaking up, busting the trusts. But no, again, this Trump derangement system, Adbusters continues. It's time again for dramatic, decisive action, which was September 17th in the original and enduring spirit of Occupy. We and tens of thousands of our fellow citizens will stream into Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. We will lay siege to the White House, and we will sustain it for exactly 50 days. This is the White House siege. A siege only works if it is sustained. We witnessed this, the multiplying power of strategic occupation 9 years ago. You dig in, hold your ground, and the tension accumulates, amplifies, goes global. 50 days, September 17th to November the 3rd. Let us once again summon the sweet, revolutionary nonviolence that was our calling card in Zuccotti Park. White House siege will electrify the U.S. election season, and it doesn't stop there. Drawing wind from Me Too, BLM, and Extinction Rebellion, and protests against Trump's lethal bungling of coronavirus, we will inspire a global movement of systemic change, a global spring, a cultural heave towards a new world order. What is our one demand? We want to collaborate with you, brainstorm tactics with you, spark a revolution with you. We need your voice of wisdom and expertise to pull off a radically democratic tone shift in our politics. First, let's get our tactics in order. Then let's screw up our courage, stuff our backpacks with the tools of nonviolent revolution, and head to Lafayette Square with intelligence to match our spirit starting September 17th. Well, there has been actual violence very close to the White House, attempts to storm the gates in recent weeks. Of course, Occupy Wall Street was a complete bust. Is Wall Street more powerful or less powerful since Occupy Wall Street? I mean, these people aren't dummies. The people who run the big business aren't dummies. That they throw a lot of money at young progressives. You want to change the world? We'll help you change the world. Just put our corporate logo at the bottom of your pronouncements. Just let everyone know that our company is on the right side of history, and there's something in it for you too. You know, a well-paying job. From NBC News, Trump says Kamala Harris nasty and disrespectful to Joe Biden, surprised by Veep pick. Yes, hashtag nasty woman was trending on Twitter today. And of course, there were all these people saying, oh, yes, let's own nasty women because, you know, that's a good thing. We all want to be nasty women. They tried that with Hillary Clinton, and it didn't work. Trump said at a press conference at the White House, I was a little surprised that he picked her. She did very, very poorly in the primaries. Trump said Harris was nasty and disrespectful to Biden during the primary, and his campaign sent out a statement claiming Harris called Joe Biden racist and asked for an apology she never received, adding that phony Kamala will abandon her own morals. Harris criticized Biden during a June 2019 primary debate for his record on busing, but stated at the time, I do not believe you are a racist. Well, anyone who follows politics knows that all of these horrible things that the candidates say about each other are forgotten, or they're at least officially forgotten, when it comes to unite for the big win in November. This happens every 4 years, without question, and it's happening. It's going to happen now. That I suppose Kamala Harris might say, how is it that you said these terribly mean things about Joe Biden back then, but now you're willing to serve as his vice president? And she'll say what politicians have said in the past. Perhaps Joe has evolved since that time, or these things were said in the heat of the moment, etc., etc. I saw two ads from the Trump campaign. Kamala Harris being a radical leftist, that was not bad, but there was another one saying that Joe Biden has a racism problem. And playing DR3, I just don't see the value in that at all. This next thing is likely to be far more efficacious. Trump talking about suburban housewives voting for him because he ended low-income housing programs. Yes. Yes. So we have Cory Booker accusing Donald Trump of racism. You know, if Donald Trump decided by executive order to give every black person in the United States $50,000 cash, it wouldn't make any difference. They'd still be calling him a racist. Now, I understand that Trump isn't fighting for black votes here, because he's not going to get very many of them. He may get a few more black men to vote for him than he did in 2016. This is supposed to be, you know, nice white women. All this talk of Biden's racism, etc. But no, they're not going to. Again, we saw with Adbusters attacking Trump as some sort of tribune of corporate concentration, whereas again, he is better on this subject than anyone else Adbusters could name. The suburban housewife will be voting for me, Trump said. They want safety and are thrilled that I ended the long-running program where low-income housing would invade their neighborhood. Biden would reinstall it in a bigger form with Cory Booker in charge. Republicans have focused their efforts on courting suburban women in recent elections, dubbing them everything from soccer moms to security moms to Walmart moms, although in 2018 the party saw such voters shift to Democrats. Trump has appealed to the voting bloc through alleged fear-mongering and racist language, using the housing issue to make his point. Trump rode back on an Obama administration rule called affirmatively furthering fair housing, intended to combat racial segregation in suburban housing last month, and claims that his decision will keep low-income housing out of such areas. Biden's campaign says he would reinstate the rule. You see, they talk about segregation. No, you have white people who decide to flee the cities, and then in many cases they flee the suburbs for the exurbs. But you get the tide drawing people in, and it's not, if some black family wants to buy a house in these suburbs, they can buy a house. They can buy a house anywhere they like in the United States of America. If they lack the money, or they would prefer to live elsewhere, that's a different matter. It should be a different matter. But the Obama administration, they put out the word. They put out the word through HUD, and they put out the word through the DOJ that white people, you can run, but you can't hide, because we're going to dump a bunch of rebarbative people in your nice neighborhoods, and they're not going to be so nice anymore. Let's see. Trump's language has been interpreted as implying he would keep minorities out of the suburbs, with his use of suburban housewife as seen as reference to white women. The last time Trump tweeted in similar terms, Elizabeth Warren called it, quote, disgusting racism, unquote. On Wednesday, the Biden campaign accused Trump of melting down in the wake of Kamala Harris's addition to the Democratic ticket. Quote, Donald Trump's presidency is melting down after his failed, divisive, erratic leadership has cost over 160,000 American lives, tens of millions of jobs, and left the United States the hardest hit country in the world by COVID-19, unquote. This is from campaign manager Andrew Bates. Obviously, Donald Trump can hardly be held responsible for 160,000 Americans dying of COVID-19, and this is dangerous rhetoric. Oh, tens of millions of jobs. Who has been locking down the hardest? No, it's not Republicans, it's Democrats. The United States, the hardest hit country in the world by COVID-19. No, I think that Italy is easily the hardest hit country in the world. But the Biden campaign is expecting ignorance from the voters, and that's what they're going to get from a great many of those voters. Every 4 years, the media pretends that the vice presidential, everyone is just so ginned up by this vice presidential pick. Well, the media needs something to write about, and this is tried and true. Essentially, they're just filling in a template. You remember Sarah Palin? She was a woman, and she was picked by that angry senator from Arizona, Senator McNasty. Curious thing happened there, which is that Sarah Palin got so much good press, so much attention, that the McCain was jealous of her. Sounds crazy, but it's true. That the McCain campaign started leaking against their own Veep nominee. Now, if you look at the branding for this campaign, the Biden-Harris campaign, you see that they have produced artwork that actually puts Kamala Harris, in front of Joe Biden. He is in the background. Scott Adams commented, is it common to put the Veep candidate in front of the top of the ticket? It's almost as if the news is priming the public for something. Yeah, Biden says he's going to be a transition president. This has never happened before. Yeah, might not be around for very long. Um, why would we want to elect someone who's not going to be around for very long? Because Kamala Harris is not going to be subject to the same scrutiny that Joe Biden is and has been subjected to and will be subjected to, because she's only going to be the VP. The media gaslights us. One of the ways in which the media gaslights us is telling us that we live under socially oppressive conditions, particularly sexually. Oh, and that women aren't allowed to be sexual. Women aren't allowed to let the world know that they enjoy sex. It's obvious nonsense, of course, but they never stop. They never stop. And I'm going to get to the most recent example of that in just a minute. But first, I'm going to go to the chat. Mike F. explains rebarbative means unattractive and objectionable. Indeed, it does. Halper says KMG is a chick magnet. No, I hardly think so. The new Rebarbatives, weren't they an 80s band? Says Mike F. That's pretty good. I like that. Let's see. Okay, and there's some argument between YT and Boreas in the chat. Chogokin666 says Adbusters funded by a vulture capitalist. Mike F., we need to do the work as individuals and as a society to start pronouncing Kamala's name correctly. Am I pronouncing it incorrectly? Is it Kamala? Or something like that? It would be best for her to go with what everyone else is saying. Years ago, the quarterback, Joe Theismann, when he was a college player, was he at Notre Dame? Well, the way the family pronounced his surname was not, in the German way. It was Theismann. But then when he was in the running for the Heisman Trophy, they decided, okay, Theismann's good. Theismann's good because it rhymes with Heisman. And so since then, it has been pronounced in the correct way. And I don't think that's a good idea for campaigns to say, you're saying this person's name wrong, because the instinctual reaction from voters is, well, what are you're saying that I'm stupid? Or are you trying to embarrass me? They really shouldn't care how anyone pronounces their name. They should just care whether they're willing to vote for the Biden ticket. Did KMG discuss the white boy executed by a jogger? I thought about it and decided no, because it is too depressing a story. What can we learn from this? Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. It was a 7-year-old boy, and he was playing in his front yard, and he was killed, shot to death by a next-door neighbor, a black man, for reasons. Why do we even talk about reasons? There's no reasons. There's just inchoate, stupid rage. That's all there is. And some of these stories get some attention. Most of them don't. This sort of thing has become routine in the United States. And again, one would have thought that it would lead to a ferocious reaction, but it has not. I don't know. Maybe this is, maybe the boomers need to die out before this will change. I've mentioned Kuhn in his book on, scientific revolutions, the structure of scientific revolutions, where he made the bold assertion that the reason why scientific orthodoxy changed on so many occasions was not because people who had opposed hypotheses, which became the dominant hypotheses, were persuaded. No, that almost never happens. They simply died out. And I think that's a general principle, applicable across all society. people are not persuaded. Very few people are ever persuaded that their views are incorrect or harmful for all sorts of reasons. I mean, it's very embarrassing. Oh, I've been saying this for 30, 40 years, but I was wrong. I was wrong. It's not true at all. And what I was saying was not only incorrect, and harmful. Well, if people said this, then the reaction would be, well, we're never going to listen to you ever again. If you got that wrong, how many other things have you got wrong? You're unreliable. So people stick to it. People stick to it, and it's not just they would be embarrassed by what other people think of them. They would be embarrassed what they think of themselves. How could I have been so stupid to be wrong about something for so long? Yes, some rude nicknames for Kamala Harris. There are quite a few. I'm not going to repeat them because, once again, this is my good taste show. Halper says, will a decisively re-elected Trump have more power to act against disorder and sabotage than in the first term? Well, that's what I hear. That's what I hear. Lame duck presidents, they don't have to worry about being re-elected. They're leaving. They don't have to worry about the political effects of their decisions are going to have on their party, because they're going to be well out of it by that time. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. All right. I don't understand this dispute within the chat. Mike F says Canadians mispronounce Obama's first name as Brack. It's Brack, isn't it? Again, I've never heard him complain. The fact that a man called Barack Hussein Obama II was elected president of the United States, that is quite remarkable. That he was elected president of the United States in 2008 after 2001 attacks. Barack Hussein Obama II. Yeah. Kama Sutra Harris. Yes, I've heard that one. Yes. And who knows what the proper Kenyan pronunciation is. Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator, says Brack was my favorite Space Ghost character. Okay, so yes. Apparently, we're living in a Victorian age where women, a glimpse of ankle is shocking. And in fact, piano legs are wrapped up because it would be, it would encourage lascivious behavior if piano legs were allowed to be naked. I, of course, am speaking about the song WAP by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, which was released August the 7th, to a media campaign which may be second to none in terms of you must adore this song or you are a racist. WAP is an acronym, and I'm not going to repeat what that acronym is because it is disgusting. It is also disconcerting as well. I know that it is a riff off of something that black people say all the time, but essentially you are talking simultaneously about the front of the body and the rear of the body, and it is very off-putting. So let's see. Let's look at what the media has to say about that. Pitchfork. Pitchfork is read by mostly white men who are interested in, I don't know, what you might call indie rock or college rock, whatever it's called now. But Pitchfork does not want to have that reputation, and so they praise black stuff to the skies because they do not want to be considered racist. But Lakin Starling called WAP a nasty-ass rap bop bursting with the personality of two of rap's most congenial household names. Whatever you say about Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, it is not reasonable to call them congenial because their whole thing is that, no, we are the opposite of congenial. We are nasty ass hoes. She wrote further that the detailed play-by-play in the verses doesn't aim to impress guys, and that the song suggests is why Cardi and Meg's expertise is credible. Expertise. How could this word expertise even be used in this context? As they center themselves as women, again, what? In order to freely celebrate their coveted power, sex appeal, and A1 WAP. Joe Caramanicana of the New York Times deemed it an event record that transcends the event itself, and stated that both rappers are exuberant, sharp, and extremely, extremely vividly detailed in the song that luxuriates in raunch. Rania Anaftos of Billboard described the song as a twerk-ready, scorching banger. Michael Wood of the Los Angeles Times deemed it a savage, nasty, sex-positive triumph, and stated that the women's vocal exuberance is the show, the way they tear into each perfectly rendered lyric, haha, and chew up the words like meat. Writing for Vulture, Craig Jenkins considered the song Class A filth for the ages, and stated, the main thrust here is the lyrics. There is so much thrusting going on in the lyrics. In Stereo Gum, Chris DeVille commented that the song has big lead single energy and is a convergence of two of the biggest stars in rap. Brianna Holt of Complex stated that both Cardi and Megan are powerhouses of female sexuality, independence, and dominance. I'll get to that in just a second. And deemed the song the epitome of female empowerment. The epitome, no less. Holt further added that art like WAP could not be more valuable and necessary during a time when people are actively trying to unlearn their own biases and recognizing ways that they contribute to the neglect of Black women. Yes, once again, because Black women in America are such shrinking violets. They are so quiet. They are so detached, removed. You know, they never make a fuss. NBC journalist Suzanne Ramirez de Arellano called the song a joyful role reversal, the triumph of delicious filth, and opined with rapid-fire flow and endlessly quotable one-liners, the two hip-hop stars create a female sex-positive anthem as they trade lyrics and grab back the genre's sexual narratives from hard male rappers. She also stated, it is as honest and tasteful as a song can get when it's about something, female pleasure and female desire in all its messiness that men still consider too vulgar for words. Now, I realize that I've entered into Ben Shapiro territory, but obviously, since this song is the epitome of female empowerment and an event record that transcends the event itself, I think there's room for me as well. And of course, there's a video, and what's being shown on YouTube is a censored version of it. There's snakes. There's a bunch of different costumes. Let's see. The video also includes cameos from Kylie Jenner, Normani, Rosalia, Mulatto, Ruby Rose, and Sukahana. Okay. So this is about female empowerment, eh? There's something very embarrassing about the timing of the release of this single and the video, which is that a couple of weeks ago, Megan Thee Stallion was shot twice in the foot after leaving a car that contained a Canadian rapper called Tory Lanez, aka Argentina Fargo. And the rumor, widely propagated and believed, is that Megan Thee Stallion had stormed out of the car in anger because apparently Tory Lanez was putting the moves on no less than Kylie Jenner. And of course, as I mentioned on the show, Kylie Jenner has been the subject of a cancel campaign because she had no right to be in this video because she's not black, or she was blacking up, she was browning up. I saw no evidence that her complexion was any different from any other pictures I've seen of her. Well, let's see. How about the video reception thereof? Chris Schaefer and Althea Legaspi of Rolling Stone called the video steamy and sensual. Chris Murphy of Vulture described it as very Dr. Seuss, but make it NSFW. It couldn't be more timely. She described the set as a mansion full of women who are demonstrative with unmatched confidence. Again, this video comes out a couple of weeks after it, and apparently that we've learned that you can't criticize Beyonce, and apparently you can't criticize Taylor Swift, and apparently now you can't criticize Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion. And Megan Thee Stallion, let's see, this is from Black Entertainment TV. Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion's epic collaboration WAP continues to draw big numbers. This sold 73 million views and counting. The ready to address. Megan chimed in with her thoughts towards the sexist criticism over pointed out the apparent and hypocritical double standards between the people who seem to take issue with WAP are the same ones who sing along to lyrics of the same nature from other artists. I do not like Ben Shapiro, but I think I can assure listeners that Ben Shapiro is not singing along to Slob on My Knob word for word. No, I don't think Ben Shapiro does that. So Hot Girl Meg, aka Megan Thee Stallion, is lashing out against hypocrisy. That, so the male rappers, the black rappers, they get to say all these disgusting things. So the women should be as well, and they should be celebrated for this. Back in 1993, BET helpfully explains, Juicy J released Slob on My Knob on his mixtape Volume 6. 6 years later, the track was re-released by Tear Dat Club Up Thugs, a subgroup of 3-6 Mafia, according to Rolling Stone. In fact, Cardi flipped some lines from that very track for her verse on Jeezy's smash hit, No Limit, which also featured ASAP Rocky. So, you up to speed yet? But wait, there's more. That the apologies have begun to roll in, starting with CeeLo Green, who has apologized to Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion, and Nicki Minaj after questioning their musical content. The 45-year-old singer took to his Instagram on Wednesday morning to post a lengthy statement to address the controversy and to make amends with the three rappers. The controversy began when he told Far Out magazine that he was questioning whether the trio of female rappers should be considered as role models due to the shameless content of their music. And there's a picture of him with his tiny little T-Rex arms. It's always very amusing to see. Okay, the Atlanta native said a lot of music today is very unfortunate and disappointing on a personal and moral level. There was once a time when we were savvy enough to code certain things we could express to those it was meant for with the style of language we used, but now music is shameless. It is sheer savagery. The FU hitmaker did not hold back as he continued to slam them for their sexual expression, going so far as to call them desperate. CeeLo explained, it's problematic. We suffer from it because there are those that have nothing to do with it, but it is assumed of everyone. You have the heads of state, like Nicki Minaj or someone who is up there in accolades, success, visibility, a platform to influence. Nicki could be effective in so many other constructive ways, but it feels desperate. Attention is a drug. It is a competition. Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, they're all more or less doing similar salacious gesturing to kind of get into position. I get it, the independent woman and being in control, the divine femininity and sexual expression. I get it, but it comes at what cost? CeeLo released a social media statement on Wednesday saying that there had been a misunderstanding about his comments, and he is actually a fan of Cardi, Megan, and Nicki. He wrote, I know most of them personally and consider Cardi an Offset family. Therefore, I would never disrespect them by any means. I acknowledge them all as powerful, beautiful, and influential women and professionals. I wholeheartedly apologize to each of them for the inconvenience they have been caused due to a snippet of my interview being used as a headline and in turn creating controversy and disconnect between me and these ladies as well as their fans. Know that I support everyone who is part of our community and culture, always have and always will. And people pointed out that some years ago, CeeLo had recorded a song which talks about drugging a woman and then having sex with her when she was unconscious. Yes, yes. But what does this song actually say? And I'm going to have to be careful here because it is truly disgusting. But it begins with a sample. And that sample is whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. Hole up. I said certified freak 7 days a week. And then the title, and make that pullout game weak woo. You see, these rappers or rap stresses are constantly being acclaimed for their excellent lyrics. They're not. They frequently contradict themselves within the same paragraph or even the same line. And oh, yeah, okay. So essentially, what this song is about is a woman or a bunch of women talking about how they use their sexual powers to get money and expensive gifts from men. That, my listeners, is the epitome of female empowerment. I want you to park that big Mack truck right in this little garage. I don't cook, I don't clean, but let me tell you how I got this ring. Yeah, a lot of use of the N-word there, which apparently is the ugliest, most taboo word in the world. I wouldn't have guessed that from reading the lyrics to this song. Talk your shit, bite your lip, ask for a car, will you ride that dick? You ain't never going to F him for a thing. He already made up his mind for he came. There's no rhyming. There's not even assonance, or they can't even manage, assonance most of the time. Look, I need a hard hitter, need a deep stroker, need a Henny drinker. Oh, the obligatory reference to Hennessy brandy. Need a weed smoker, not a garter snake. Okay. Just like his credit. Okay. And the rhyming of wet it with diabetic. All right. And yeah, my head game is fire. Punani Dasani. Dasani is a brand of bottled. It's a brand of bottled water. That word has no place there. But never mind. Never mind that. Your Honor, I'm a freak bitch. Handcuffs, leashes. Switch my wig. Make him feel like he cheating. Etc. 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 Never lost a fight, but I'm looking for a beaten. Well, that certainly, once again, sounds like the epitome of female empowerment. And then there's a reference to a truly disgusting and unhealthy sexual act, which I'm not going to spell out. And it ends with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 repetitions of there's some whores in this house. I think that CeeLo made a good point that, okay, for decades now, we've had male rappers talking about what? Talking about shooting people, putting a cap in someone's ass, about their Hennessy and their Maybach or Maybach cars, whatever, about how they had that hoe first. I'm the best, you're the worst, etc., etc. Correlation is not causation, of course, but I think it's reasonable to assume that tens of millions of people listening to and idolizing this kind of music has had an effect on their behavior. Get rich or die trying. I don't think that that's a very healthy model, but it's one that's been adopted again by many millions of Black American males. So now the ladies are doing it as well. And so, what effect is this going to have on uh, young Black women in the United States? I mean, those who've not already been corrupted by this vile stuff. But going back to what I said at the beginning, the media truly about sexuality, and especially Black women. Oh no, no, you never ever talk about that because Black women are thinking violence. Everyone knows that is the opposite of truth, but I guess if we are told the same lie enough times, we'll start to believe it. I want to talk about ice cream now, particularly a company called Halo Top Creamery ice cream in the United States, and it outsells. So Halo Top is running a show overweight, and yet she is dancing up a storm in her apartment, dancing around, and the ad instructs the viewer that stop shouldna, stop saying shouldna to people. Don't do that. Stop should, perhaps she too. And oh God, I don't know. Is there a lot of shaming going on in American society these days? If so, I haven't noticed it. And it's all and it would be a wicked person who would point out these consequences. Ratioed desire, satisfy, consume. This advertising campaign is not what one might expect because Halo Top is the low-calorie ice cream. According to Wikipedia, Halo Top's a cream brand, but it's distinct due to its substitution for sugar. Halo Top uses organic stevia, a plant-based sweetener, and erythritol cream. Each pint ranges from 240 to 360 calories. The way that they are advertising this is that this is decadent food. Of course, food can't be decadent, but I'm using the parlance of our time. But it's not. So what's going on here? What's going on? And someone referred to a famous essay by the Last Psychiatrist, which is a website which is sadly no longer around, about the famous Dove Beauty campaign, which was it was a bait and switch. If you remember, the Dove Beauty campaign for women is that apparently they asked women to describe themselves or draw a picture of themselves, and these women were not happy with themselves. But Dove was there to tell these women that they were beautiful, that all women are beautiful, really. And if that is the case, obviously, why do they need to buy beauty projects? I guess because Dove is the company that cares about women. This essay is from 2013, the Dove Sketches Beauty Scam. And there is a still from David Mamet's first movie, The Only Way to Win Is Not to Play. Remember, let's see, dude, are you doing the Dove ad now? That was so April 15th. Yes, I realize I missed the meme train, but it's better to be right than part of the debate, especially when there is no debate, that this is a short con inside a 50-plus year con. Remember House of Games? It's called a confidence game. Why? Because you give me your confidence? No, because I give you mine. And what's with you and Fan de Reagan, David Mamet? It's not my fault Dove cost Joe cast Joe Mantegna as the sketch artist. And anyway, if you want to understand the world today, you have to understand how the dumbest generation of narcissists in the history of the world was educated. See also 9.5 weeks. And then there's a video showing the con that Joe Mantegna pulls on the Marine at the Western Union office. Everyone likes to know the secrets of the game, and this scene certainly satisfies. Joe Mantegna shows a famous psychiatrist, played tellingly by David Mamet's future ex-wife, how a short con is done, how it's improvised, and how he makes it look so easy. Really easy, except for the part where you have to connect with a perfect stranger and make them like you. Did you find yourself wondering if you had the skills to pull it off? Better watch it again, sucker. Quick test for a con. What questions does it not occur to you to ask? Well, you were married. Why didn't Mantegna take that guy's money at the end? Why did he let him off the hook? He was just doing it as an example. Oh, like when a guy says he'll just put in the tip. It's not like the psychiatrist doesn't know he's a thief. That's why they were there in the first place. So he purposely didn't steal the money to make the psychiatrist feel at ease, feel closer to him, to earn her confidence by first giving her his. She's the mark. The aborted short con is part of an unseen long con. But the genius of the scene is that while you, the viewer, are criticizing the stilted dialogue or the improbability of the success, dude, that would never work in real life. If you search your sclerotic heart, you will find that you yourself felt good that Mantegna didn't take that guy's money, that he let him go. It endeared you to Joe. It made you feel more sympathetic to him, like he's an ethical thief. In other words, he's given you his confidence, which means that the true mark is you. And then there's a quotation from this campaign. Women are their worst beauty critics. At Dove, we are committed to creating a world where beauty is a source of confidence, not anxiety. That's why we decided to conduct a compelling social experiment that proves to women something very important. You are more beautiful than you think. Oh my God, you might say. I know it's just an ad, but it's such a positive message. If some street hustler challenges you to a game of three-card Monte, you don't need to bother to play. Just hand him the money, not because you're going to lose, but because you owe him for the insight. He selected you. Whatever he saw in you, everyone sees in you, from the dumb blonde at the bar to your elderly father you've dismissed as out of touch. The only person who doesn't see it is you, which is why you fell for it. Even mirrors fail you. Hence, a sketch. The gimmick that propels the Dove ad is a comparison between subjectivity and objectivity, though in this case, objectivity is defined as however well Mantegna can use a charcoal pencil. Why not just use a photograph? Because when it comes to beauty, we all know photographs can be manipulated, especially in ads, especially by Dove. So the ad frees you from your cynicism and goes with a new standard of beauty, one that, like yoga or genetics, has been around for a long time and you know very little about it. It hasn't been over-critiqued, you haven't watched it fail over and over, and thus seems pure, fantastical, true, the artist's sketch. How can anything this lovingly and precisely created not be the real thing? And nothing makes a middle-aged neurotic happier than 45 minutes alone in a loft with a good-looking man who requires no sexual content and just wants to listen to you talk about yourself, unless he's also sketching you attentively in natural light. Can I offer you a Pinot Grigio? Slow down, Christian, you're making me woozy. There is not enough quantitative easing in the universe to prop up this fantasy, but you can't say America's not committed to the attempt. The mistake in interpreting this ad is in assuming the ad is selling based on the women on their beauty. If that were true, it would be counterproductive. If they are naturally beautiful, if the problem is actually a psychological one, then they certainly don't need any beauty products. A beauty ad operates by creating a gap between you and an ideal by reducing an anxiety that can only be mitigated by the product. But this ad reduces anxiety and avoids cynicism. Therefore, it is not a beauty products ad. It is selling something else. This is why there aren't any products in the ad. Dove is telling you don't need to do anything to be beautiful, but it knows full well women must do something to themselves to feel good about themselves. And if they don't need makeup, then at least a moisturizing soap. All Dove needs to solidify this is to be recognized as an authority on beauty, real beauty, not fake, photoshopped eyeliner and push-up bras beauty. It's the sketch artist who is the most important character in ad. The ad is selling him. That's why he doesn't just draw the sketches. He sticks around to chaperone these women to self-awareness. The ad lets the women become beautiful without selling them anything. It lets them win. It lets them win. It invites you to Dove. It makes you feel more sympathetic to Dove, like it's an ethical beauty products company. It gave these women its confidence. It gave you, the viewer, its confidence. And then, spoiler alert, it will screw you and take your money. And this is, again, very much like this ad for Halo Top ice cream. Calorie ice cream. This is, I suppose you could say, the ethical ice cream. The one that's not going to make your body blow up like a balloon. And so they show this very fat black woman having a whale of a time, no pun intended, while gorging herself on this ice cream. You see, she doesn't need to eat healthier food. But they are the company that's producing the supposedly healthier ice cream. It is the same scam running that Dove ran. Let's see. Did the way the sketching sessions were conducted remind you of anything? The women aren't in yoga casual. No one's wearing sneakers. They got a little dressed up for the appointment. Observe the way they talk about themselves, trying to find just the right words because, their inner experience is very complicated. And the unfinished, hesitating haste in which they take their handbags and walk out at the end, leaving the artist behind. The loft is certainly an inviting, comfortable setting, warm and safe, but it doesn't belong to them. They know they are merely visitors in a shared space. The setting is exactly like therapy. You may think this is a psychiatrist's House of Games viewer's biased perception of this, except that A, they're in San Francisco, where the main output is crematorium roast coffee and cash-only psychiatry, and B, yes, my father was emotionally very distant, and so was my mom, and I didn't get the emotional comfort that I needed. Yeah, and so did that affect the way that you actually look? But no, you see, these big companies, they're your friends. And these days, they especially like women. Oh, and, Black Lives Matters. And black women, they might suggest that morbid obesity leads to diabetes, and it leads to heart disease, which are disproportionate killers of Black Americans. But that might get in the way of making money. So we're not going to have that. So a final look at the chat. KMG can't be more than 5'9", and he brings the girls to the yard. It says Quachalango. Actually, I am 5'11". Brent Studemeyer says, but KMG has a Chad tier intelligent. Well, that's very kind of you, I must say. Now I want ice cream. No, you see, it's been explained. I think this principle is well known. It's the same principle why the low-tar nicotine cigarettes don't work. That people, well, apparently Al Gore made a huge deal out of this, that the cigarette companies were cheating people because they found that people who smoked these low-tar cigarettes were puffing more intently. The reason that they were puffing more intently is because they were feeling cheated. It has been observed about diet food for decades now that it encourages an illusion in people that you can eat as much of it as you like because it is diet food. It has, it has less sugar and less fat, and again, people are going to be cheated. So maybe it has, 1/4 the calories. That doesn't stop people from eating 4 servings of it, 4 pints of it. It's a kind of con game. Now, I haven't tasted this Halo Top Creamery ice cream, and it could be that their chemists have devised that their chemists are genius, and it tastes as good as real ice cream but I wouldn't bet on it. It's the same scam with, 2% milk or skim milk or butter. People use butter because it is delicious. Yes, 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 it's full of fat, but fat is good for you, full of calories, etc. Uh, but the solution is to not to enjoy it to excess. But no, of course, we must enjoy this to excess because if we didn't enjoy, say, ice cream to excess, then Ben and Jerry's wouldn't have become big enough to be bought out by Unilever. KMG wellies or jodhpurs. I don't wear boots. I don't know. I was bought boots when I was a child, when I was in school, and it always seemed goofy to wear boots. And so I'd always seize any excuse not to wear them. I got bought a plastic Macintosh raincoat, and it was canary yellow. And there was I was going to wear that to school. No way I was going to do that. Jim Bowden says, KMJ, I've been following your stream for a time now. My question is, when will you check out from the motel? Well, it's either going to be Friday or Saturday. That's the end of the line here. I should have confirmation on the date tomorrow. That's Thursday, right? Getting pretty close to the deadline. That is the show for today. Tomorrow is Theater Thursday, and I'm going to be discussing episodes 6 to 10 of Kieslowski's Decalogue. And on Friday, the book club, if there is a book club, will be Piers Paul Reed's The Dreyfus Affair. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed the show or any part of it, I would appreciate if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be very much appreciated, especially as I am being forced to move again, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send me money directly through Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this in these days of social atomization and civilizational destruction. I dearly hope that all my dear viewers and listeners manage to form a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.